welcome to the Resilience Pathway Report launch event. My name is Sahar Safai from Sage on Earth Consulting, the lead consultant for the Disaster Risk Reduction Pathways project, which this Resilience Pathways report is the final component of this multi-year project. I want to start with acknowledging the fact that the land I live, work, learn and play in North Vancouver is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. By now you're familiar with the Zoom protocol and best practices. So yes, add the name of your institution to your name. Keep yourself mute. If you can, keep your videos on so that at least we maintain a sense of connection. Without getting too distracted, go around, browse and see who else is on the call, and to get a sense of basically one of our objectives of celebrating all of us coming together for this work, and this morning, in a sense, for launching the work. Use the chat for first introducing yourself, a good morning message to everyone, but also for questions. We'll do our best to answer the questions on chat during this 1 hour, but if we cannot, because we have a lot to cover, we'll make sure we will have information and responding to those questions in our future communication coming to you soon. The DRR Pathways project and the Resilience Pathways report are led by Natural Resources Canada, Geological Survey of Canada unit, and it's funded by Defence Research and Development Canada through the Canadian Safety and Security Program. I will start before passing it on to the hosts to basically open and welcome you. I'll start with the burning question of what is the Resilience Pathways report? Because among the audience, there are our special guests who are people who we may not have had a chance to have one-on-one conversations to describe the project. So let's get that out of our, to communicate clearly what the Resilience Pathways report before we actually start our session. So it's basically a knowledge sharing initiative. It will be a comprehensive collection of short, concise, accessible articles that will share knowledge and insights from organizations and various actors in resilience planning in BC. Now, without any further ado, I'll ask our speakers, the first round of speakers representing the institutions that are enabling and supporting this work, to welcome you and start the day. Sonia Talwar, Director at Geological Survey of Canada, Natural Resources Canada, and Giovanni Fusina, from Defense Scientist from DRDC. Then we are going to hear from Malaika Olmi, Geoscientist and part of management team at GSC at NRCan. She will kind of take us through the journey or the pathway of getting to where we are, the resilience pathway so far in BC, but especially through the lens and work of GSC. Without any further ado, pass it on to Sonia. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Sahar. I also acknowledge that I'm participating in this event today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. As Sahar mentioned, I'm Sonia Talwar. It really gives me great pleasure to be here with you all today and to welcome you to this launch event. I think we all know that realizing effective strategies to address disaster risk and climate resilience takes dialogue, diverse perspectives, and sound foundations in research. As a federal science and tech organization, Natural Resources Canada's work is really focused on broadly improving the quality of life of Canadians, and certainly part of our mandate is to understand innovative science, generate ideas, and transform using technologies and different approaches. Further, within the Geological Survey, keeping Canada safe also underpins a lot of our programmatic areas within the Geological Survey. The types of challenges that disaster risk reduction and climate resilience place on society are those wicked problems. They need creative solutions. And within our risk-related activities over the past number of years, we've been working on frameworks to understand and communicate risk and involve those wide reaches of society who can contribute to this collective path forward. Sendai also gives us a grounding, not only to understand risk, but the importance of looking at new ways of working together. And I think today's launch event helps us all continue on that path together. From NRCan, we're really grateful to Defence Research Development Canada's commitments to research through their Canadian Safety and Security Program and for their direct funding for the work to us over the past number of years. So with that, thank you very much. And I look forward to today's event.
Thank you so much. Giovanni. I think you're on mute if you're speaking.
Hello, I'm Giovanni Fusina. I'm the Natural Hazards Portfolio Manager at Defence R&D Canada Centre for Security Science, and DRDC Centre for Security Science, in partnership with Public Safety Canada, is responsible for managing the Canadian Safety and Security Program that you've already heard about from Sonia and Sahar. So the CSSP, Canadian Safety and Security Program, aims to strengthen Canada's ability to anticipate, prevent and mitigate, prepare for and respond to natural disasters and acts of terrorism, crime, and serious accidents through the convergence of science and technology with policy, operations, and intelligence. So we recognize at CSSP that it's not enough to have the S&T tools and knowledge readily available to solve certain complex problems such as disaster risk reduction, but you also need the convergence of S&T with policy and with governance and processes to make it all happen. So the Disaster Risk Reduction Pathways project, which, as Sahar mentioned, is still a CSSP project as part of our call for proposals funding mechanism. The culmination of this work is these pathway reports, which hopefully, and I certainly think they will be successful. They will lay the foundation for this convergence of science, policy, and process and people to bring about a disaster risk resilience hub to the region of British Columbia, and hopefully it can be expanded to other regions of Canada. So I want to thank very much everybody at NRCan and everybody involved in this project, of course, Sahar as well, for bringing this forward and starting this initiative, which I think is very forward-looking in the area of disaster risk reduction. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the encouraging words. Malaika, take us through the journey.
You're on mute there, Malaika.
Thanks, sorry. Thank you. I'm coming to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. And I'm going to elaborate a bit on what Sonia was speaking to, and I hope you're seeing my screen. I'm just, so elaborating on kind of the history within our organization of this work. At the Geological Survey of Canada, we are Canada's geoscience agency. So fundamentally, we're a research organization that develops knowledge for sustainable resource management and geoscience knowledge to keep Canada safe from natural hazards and risks. So how we do that, the way we execute on that is through one of our 13 programs called the Public Safety Geoscience Program, which conducts research on natural hazards and the risks they pose with the goal of reducing risk and their impacts on our economy, our people, and the environment. And the specific hazards of interest are within our mandate are earthquakes, landslides, and that's terrestrial and submarine landslides, tsunamis, volcanoes, floods, and space weather. I should say coastal floods too. So in terms of how we've gotten to where we are, building on a history of kind of geophysics and understanding earthquakes, this kind of shows you part of that evolution of where we've gone from some pure hazard research in understanding the fundamental conditions around natural hazards, such as the kind of where, when, and how often, to considering impacts, to officially integrating socioeconomic and engineering data to understand research, to where we are today with Pathways, which promotes more effective modes of interaction between researchers, practitioners, and to identify incentives for disaster risk reduction decisions. So recognizing that it's fundamentally about people. So the DRR Pathways project certainly represents the next step in that evolution I was showing in seeking to bring these people together. And with many partners, this has brought a lens of systemic risk to support policies and mechanisms for risk governance and risk reduction. And showing here are the indicators that speak to the values that support decision-making in the risk reduction process. Further, fundamentally, how we got here, I think, is the vision of my esteemed colleague, Marie Journet, who looked at knowledge of geoscience knowledge and what he saw on the ground and how that can profoundly change and inform and make our lives better. And looked at not just the hazard knowledge, but the risk and the full decision-making process and people that need to come around that to protect things like what we value in this region. And then, of course, it's fundamentally about the shared threat that we all face. So I think these things within the GSC have led us to where we are today. And in terms of DRR Pathways, this work was led by this impressive project team, but it's the participation of a broader group, including everyone here today, that gives the work legs and makes it bigger than the sum of its parts. Reducing risk isn't something any of us can do or even really contribute to in isolation. And we've seen that over the last 2 to 3 years, where we've come together around understanding risk BC and acknowledge that it's the coming together of all of us with our disparate knowledge and experiences that makes this richer and possible. So the hub concept, that need for connection, has really built the foundation, demand, and momentum for this report. And so the scope of the report builds on the momentum, but it's beyond the scope of the project, bringing together the kind of multi-hazard, multi-sectoral group of hundreds of authors. So the process it contributes to our research and developing what we do. It both informs our research and provides a venue for delivery of the knowledge, as does the hub concept and everything we're growing here. So I am really excited to be part of the report, and I hope we look back on it as another key step in reducing risk in the region. Thanks.
Sahar, you're on mute.
Thank you, of course. Thank you, Sonia, Giovanni, and Malaika. I was just making a comment that it has been, for me, past 3 years of working with NRCan colleagues, always has been inspiring, but also very impressed with their vision and commitment to think bigger and thinking about the ultimate impact that the research can have on risk reduction. So now I will start. In the next 10 minutes, my goal is to share a bit more information and shed light, especially for those of you that we haven't had in-depth detailed conversation about the overview, the vision of this work, the objectives, scope, and the process. It's going to be intense. I will skim through some of the slides, but we are recording this presentation and the slides will also be available on the website, which is DRRPathways.ca. But first, I want to give you some background on the concepts that basically have been guiding us and giving us the foundations for scoping and designing this process, taking you to a little bit of couple of levels up from the focus of this work to the global frameworks for resilience. 3 frameworks came to effect in 2015: Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, Paris Agreement for Climate Change, and Sustainable Development Goals, which has 17 beautifully designed goals articulated through a series of indicators on various aspects of the society. Especially the most favorite one among the three for me is the Sustainable Development Goals, which people who know me and my relationship with the Sendai framework might get surprised. But I love the SDGs because first, they're heartwarming. Like in the chaos of especially the international world, at international and national level in many countries, the chaos that we see, it was heartwarming to know that 197 countries have developed these, have come together and developed these based on inputs from their experts and advisors, and have the ambitions for a far more beautiful world, more equitable and safe and resilient space for all of us to live in. Resilience is the common denominator among these three frameworks. And the message and the point for us, the one that we have taken on, is the fact that the only way to have effective resilience building is to mainstream disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation to the development plans, investments, and operations of different sectors of the society. As for those of you who have seen the wide range of topics, this has been guiding us for scoping this report with a wide range of topics and inviting a wide range of partners across the society to come to contribute. The piece of Sendai that builds on that are the three pillars of Sendai framework. One is preventing creation of new disaster risk. This is making sure the new development across in various sectors is not creating new risk by putting our assets in hazardous areas, in vulnerable spaces. The second is reducing existing disaster risk through structural and non-structural measures. And at last, managing residual risk, because no matter what, there will be still residual risk, and only with planning for emergency response, recovery and build back better, we can basically build resilience to manage that risk. All of this is pointing to the fact that risk is systemic, and risk management also has to have a systemic approach with the role of the whole of society, but also all the diverse set of measures need to be risk informed. Without knowing risk, without understanding the extent of the problem, we cannot design measures to manage that problem. But there is no silver bullet solution. There is no one tool that you can produce and expect solutions coming out of it. We also believe that the solutions come out of the interaction between the people who have agency, the knowledge about risk and risk management, and the governance mechanism that they are functioning in. So these basically have gave us the foundation and the guiding principles for the vision of this work, but also for the design and scoping of this work. 3 objectives for the DRR Pathways report: sharing knowledge and information about the existing practices and capacities. So sharing information about the baseline of today, how much do we understand our hazards and risk, where the information is, and what is the risk management practice, but also providing guidance for the path forward by identifying the gaps and strategic recommendations for improving our understanding of risk and risk management. The third objective, which is linked and built on the other 2, but it shows how timely this work is and the opportunity for it to have an influence and impact, is the fact that we think this can contribute to the implementation of the Sendai framework, which was adopted by the government of BC in 2018, and modernization of the Emergency Program Act by EMBC, which is in progress. The audience aligned with this whole of society approach are all practitioners, decision makers, policy makers, knowledge seekers, and actors at provincial, regional, and local level. I would say also the federal level, researchers in technical institutions and academia, civil society organizations, and the private sector. The purpose is for these 55 plus set of articles written in simple language, accessible freely with open license online, is to be a reference and resource for practitioners at municipal and First Nation communities. A go-to place to start with on whatever topic that they need to inform themselves of what is the current status of play, where to find resources and support. But also we think it can help with monitoring progress of how our approaches, our way of thinking are progressing in disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, because we hope we can continue doing this every few years and be able to build on it and monitor how we are growing. we hope it can be, and we're designing it so that it is a platform for collective and strategic voice or expert advice, expert opinion of the whole of society for the path forward. It's important to share with you that we do have ambitions to incorporate Indigenous vision and approaches for understanding the complexity of risk and the natural space throughout this report. We are adopting and trying to incorporate the concept that is at the heart of the culture of all Indigenous communities, that everything is one and everything is connected, both at the physical, ecological space, but also throughout time. The risk we have today is the result of decisions we have made past in time in the physical space. And what we are doing today dictates our risk levels and resilience levels in the future. So we are maintaining that throughout the report, which is basically systemic nature of the risk. And we hope we can have, and as part of the templates, we are asking the authors to include Indigenous knowledge on relevant topics, but also have 2 dedicated articles, one on best approaches for consultation and integration of Indigenous knowledge and unique needs into the projects, kind of very practical note, but also another one on unique challenges from disaster impacts and the unique needs of unique capacities and needs of Indigenous communities for disaster risk reduction. We are in the process of getting further resources to make this happen to the best quality possible, the best way possible. Table of content. I'm not going to read through this, and it's not going to be a quiz, but to just give you an overview of what we have. Don't get overwhelmed. Most of you are going to focus on one topic. The executive summary will be in a policy note format. It will build on all the recommendations coming from all the different articles. Chapter 1, setting the context. Chapter 2, understanding climate and disaster risk. A wide range of hazards will be covered. Chapter 3, status of disaster and climate risk management, various components of DRR and climate change adaptation. Then the whole of society approach, critical infrastructure, operators and providers, and the role of different stakeholder groups, proposed approaches and tools for enabling collaboration. Like, main point of all of this is that we want to encourage more collaboration across hazards and sectors. We need to at least speak the same language and use the same indicators and approaches. And chapter 6, emerging capabilities, concept and projects, which includes disaster DRR pathways project components. The process, again, the details of what I'm showing here will be available, but just to give you a quick overview, we had the initiation phase started in December and January with our advisory committee, and we got a lot of great input and push for expanding the scope from our advisory committee. We have been going through the preparation phase, identifying authors. There's still a lot that we need to do in reaching out to the authors. We have identified a lot, and some of you who are in this call is because we know we have to come to you if we haven't come yet. So please write us, however, on whatever topic you want to contribute. Don't wait for us to reach out because it might take a little bit while, but we are doing our best. Also had an open call that was sent out to kind of widen our reach to get inputs such on pilots, challenges, and recommendations from wider range of communities. And we are, in a sense, ending our preparation phase, or still overlapping, but with this launch event. We are moving into development phase, May to August, where the co-authors with their review panel will develop the pieces. The open call, whatever we receive, we will pass it on to the authors to decide how they want to incorporate. It might be a bullet on a challenge. It might be a box on a pilot project if it's relevant. In September, the project team will have the pieces. We will do the review, harmonization, connection between the pieces, and write the overarching pieces such as opening and ends of the chapters and the policy notes. Finalizing it early next year and publishing it hopefully a year from now, both on NRCan GeoScan publication website and the DRR Pathways website. They will be accessible as individual pieces with searchable keywords and open licensing. authors are going to receive an author agreement that outlines the licensing agreement, which is a typical publicly funded licensing. We had an open call. Some of you may have seen it. It's still open and out. We have already been receiving submissions, amazing submissions. Please follow the Twitter of the DRR Pathways, share the call, and help us reach out and have more people hear about it and provide and submit pieces that can enrich the articles. So Resilience Pathways on Twitter. I hope we go from 21 at least to 121. We have about, I think, 73 people on the call right now. So let's get at least to 73. I want to end with thanking the project team, especially Nikki and Shayna, who, you know, Nikki from NRCan, who is basically the project manager for the DRR Pathways at this time, and Shayna, who is our amazing editor and designer. They both have been providing honest, at times brutal, in a very good way, feedback to keep the work in line and on track with their amazing energy and advice. We also have Puria and Aphrodite from UBC and SFU. While they have time, besides doing their thesis, they help us with some aspects of the work. Last but not least, I really want to have a shout out to our advisory committee, who came together in December and January throughout few meetings, group meetings, and then one-on-one conversations. They have been amazing in helping us scoping this, have pushed us further. The wide range of topics you see is not all our fault. The advisory committee have asked for taking advantage of this opportunity, the momentum that has been built through URBC Symposium, DRR Hub concept, to make this happen, bring these topics together as a reference, authoritative source of information, and for defining the path forward. So thank you so much. And we still need to, we are relying on your support, continuing moving forward. Okay. I haven't got any warning. I'm surprised about time, but I'm glad.
Yeah, you do have a warning, actually, Sahar. I think you need to pass it to Catherine at this point.
Yes, I have done. Thank you so much,
that.
Nikki.
Yeah.
So we have a set of amazing, beautiful speakers. I've set out a challenge for them to speak only 3 minutes. We'll see how they do. And you're going to hear from them to see that not only they're beautiful on these photos, but they're also very beautiful in their minds and hearts. So we start with Catherine Ford, Executive Director, Disaster Risk Reduction at EMBC. Emily Dicken, I hope she has joined, the Director at North Shore Emergency Management. I do have a short bio. So Catherine, Executive Director at EMBC. She's inspired by the passion of practitioners in the field of emergency management, trying to stay in the saddle of cantankerous horses and her 5-pound Yorkshire Terrier who shames her on the hikes. Catherine, floor is yours.
Thanks, Sahar. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to join you today from the traditional territory of the WSÁNEĆ people. So in the fall of 2018, as Sahar had mentioned, the province adopted the United Nations Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And around the same time, we also began the process of modernizing our Emergency Program Act, which is scheduled to be introduced in the spring of next year. And so the Sendai framework, coupled with this new legislation, is going to guide how we approach mitigating and preparing for, responding to, as well as recovering from disasters. And then subsequent regulations and policies are going to further detail how we can encourage our understanding of disaster risk, strengthen our risk governance, invest in disaster risk reduction, and also enhance disaster preparedness for effective response and build back better. And these, of course, are the 4 priority actions that are identified within Sendai. And this requires whole of society, as well as understanding better practices and continuously monitoring and improving. So this Resilience Pathways report is a reflection of this. And the outcomes of this report can also guide future work and influence policy and decision makers. It also importantly continues that conversation that we have started within the community of practitioner, but importantly, it extends this conversations to others that also need to be included. And so we at Emergency Management BC are very pleased to be a part of this and to work with partners in the extension of this conversation and the action that can result. So thank you to Sahar and the team at Natural Resources Canada, as well as DRDC, and all those that are contributing and in attendance to this important project. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Catherine, for all your support throughout the DRR Pathways project and this report. Emily Dicken, are you there? Because we haven't heard from her since this morning. Okay, I think she couldn't join. She has been actually helping us. Emily is with North Shore Emergency Management now for the past few months, but before she was with First Nation Health Authority, and she has been a great advisor on the incorporation of Indigenous knowledge and the concept that we have worked on so far. So we go to the next round of our amazing speakers. So now we are switching basically to chapter 3, which is the hazard and risk assessment. So we have Tamsin Lyle from Ebwater. She's the principal and founding engineer at Ebwater Consulting, where she leads a small but mighty and gang of scientists, engineers, and communicators who relish helping communities reducing the risk to natural hazards. They also enjoy flood puns and, more surprisingly, hazard-inspired interpretive dances. That defines Tamsin very well, truly. And Ryan, postdoctoral research fellow with the School of Community and Regional Planning at UBC. His research explores the interface between natural hazards and society with a focus on coastal hazards, community and household preparedness planning, and how we communicate risk to the public. As you can see, all of our speakers are passionate about risk communication and reaching to the public. And we have Cam Campbell, who first got into the avalanche business at a young age in order to fulfill his lifelong dream to get paid to ski powder and drop bombs out of helicopters. But these days he spends a lot more time thinking and writing about avalanches so he can fulfill his other lifelong dream to be the world's best dad. With that, I would pass it on to Tamsin. Please go ahead.
Bonjour tout le monde. My name's Tamsin, and I'm here to present to you my passion for one of the hazards. I think I will be one of the co-authors of the flood section of this report, and that's because flood is the coolest hazard. It's got the most complex character. It can be fast, it can be slow, it can be deep, it can be shallow. You don't know when it's going to come, or you have warning. There's so much complexity in this hazard. And I think that makes it super exciting to research and understand, but also incredibly difficult to communicate to other scientists and decision makers, that there's just not one answer. There's never one silver bullet. We've already heard that term. There are so many solutions that we could be applying to mitigate our damages from flood, and we're not necessarily. And so it's really important for us to understand and communicate the complexity of this hazard. And because of this wicked and systemic nature, the other really key thing about it is the collaborative nature of working in this field and in flood is to make sure that we're working across disciplines, that we're working with all of the family that I see on the screen right now to ensure that we're getting to a solution that really works for everybody, for all of society. And so that's what really sort of inspired me to jump on this with a few. Definitely some voluntolding and poking to co-author this particular chapter was the fact that there was an opportunity to really collaborate. And I know it's certainly part of the way that I work in all my projects. I love collaborating with other people. I love listening to other stories and bringing them into my work. And I know that every time I do that, the work that I do is much, 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 much stronger. So I'm super excited to invite other people to join us. So on that note, our team is the flood chapter, the Riverine flood chapter is being co-authored by myself and Cher King-Scobie. And we have a small gang of people, but we're looking to build the resilience of our team who are working in flood. So we have a small advisory group, but we would love and entertain anybody else who would like to come join us. and talk about flood and some of the great mitigative actions that we're not applying today and we could be applying in future. So I invite you to reach out to me and join Team Flood. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Tamsin. Ryan.
All right, well, I'm on Team Tsunami, so we'll have to have a little fight going on there. So yeah, today I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the work that our team at UBC has been exploring around neighborhood hazard vulnerability, resilience, and recovery as part of the DRR Pathways project. Our team is being led by Dr. Stephanie Chang and is made up of both researchers and graduate students with backgrounds in engineering, planning, geospatial analysis, emergency preparedness, and risk communication, of course. We see our role as social scientists, and from that to explore hazards risks through the lens of communities, neighborhoods, and households, where we're integrating both the physical and social components at each of those three scales. So this work builds on top of the hazard risk modeling scenarios and physical impact assessments that are being completed by our other Pathways partners. And we're combining the physical and social aspects of risk to kind of help us identify those neighborhoods that are most susceptible to disruption following a disaster and kind of work with the planners and emergency managers to implement strategies that we think will help promote community hazards resilience down the road. So our team contributed basically to three parts in the project. First, we partnered with the City of Vancouver, Natural Resources Canada, Sage on Earth, and Compass Resources Management towards the development of a shared set of social vulnerability metrics for the Vancouver region as part of the city's seismic retrofit program, thinking that shared metrics are critical to communicating between groups. Our team reviewed past studies of social vulnerability, both nationally and internationally, to determine which metrics, would best address the needs of our partners. And for this project, we set up a set of 15 hazard vulnerability indicators that we grouped into 3 social vulnerability themes, and you can find those in our report. Second, we partnered with Metro Vancouver, Natural Resources Canada, and Sage on Earth again to explore how neighborhoods and neighborhood risk changes over time. First, we used a historical census data to determine probabilistically how neighborhoods have changed structurally over time. Then we applied the region's projected growth models to estimate what these neighborhoods might look like in 2035 and 2050 from a risk perspective. Using earthquake scenarios developed by INTERCAN, we then explored how future earthquakes might impact those changing and growing neighborhoods in our future. Finally, we partnered with the University of Victoria, Natural Resources Canada, Defence Research and Development Canada, and of course, Sage on Earth, to demonstrate the emerging power of data, spatial analysis, and kind of the integrated modeling of earthquake impacts between our groups. This work will eventually show how both physical and socioeconomic factors combine to affect a neighborhood's ability to recover from significant disaster events, particularly earthquakes. And we're currently working with these partners to describe that in a kind of clear way about how we combine the critical infrastructure recovery modeling efforts from UVic and DRDC with our team's work on social vulnerability and recovery indicators to try and understand the many interdependencies that exist between critical infrastructure, our society, and what those mean to kind of neighborhood earthquake recovery. How's that for 3 minutes?
Yeah, I think you're done, Ryan. So thank you for being brief, and thanks for the description and the overview. Yeah, we can pass it over to Cam now. That'd be great.
Thanks, Nikki, and good morning, everybody. First of all, I just wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge my co-author, Pascal Hagley, who's an assistant professor at the and the NSERC Industrial Research Chair in Avalanche Risk Management at the School of Resource Environmental Management at SFU. I'd also like to acknowledge members of our steering committee that Pascal and I have formed, including Joe Obad, who's the executive director of the Canadian Avalanche Association, Carl Klassen, manager of the Public Avalanche Warning Service at Avalanche Canada, Grant Statham, visitor safety specialist with Parks Canada, Bruce Jameson, an Avalanche researcher and consultant and former University of Calgary professor emeritus of civil engineering, and then Rob Anderson, who's the senior manager for the BC Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure, Avalanche and Weather Programs. Pascal and I actually worked with most of this group on the Canadian Avalanche Association's 2-year framework for avalanche risk assessment and mitigation project, which was completed in 2018. And we're really excited to get the band back together with some fresh perspective. From an avalanche point of view, I believe this work is valuable because avalanches are a nationwide natural hazard that are only starting to get recognition as such. Historically, I believe avalanches weren't really viewed in the same lens as other natural hazards such as flooding, earthquakes, wildfire, et cetera, because, you know, although avalanches are responsible for over 10 fatalities per year on average, the risk is primarily voluntary and, you know, as in winter backcountry recreation. However, you know, the 2003 Connaught Creek avalanche disaster in Glacier National Park, where 7 grade 10 students were tragically killed, is an example of a seemingly voluntary activity where the risk acceptance may not have been, or may actually have been involuntary. Additional areas of involuntary risk from avalanches include the provincial highway networks in BC, Alberta, Yukon, Quebec, and elsewhere in Canada, where risk is actually increasing with increased traffic volume and dependence on these transportation corridors. Worker safety is another important aspect of avalanche risk management, as industries such as the resource extraction push deeper into the mountains. There are currently only a handful of residential developments with avalanche risk in Canada. However, that's also expected to increase as demand for recreational properties in mountain resort municipalities increases. We only have to look at the European Alps to see that avalanches have the potential to become a major natural disaster for some mountain communities. As a longtime avalanche professionals, it's very encouraging to see decreasing trend in fatalities over the past 20 years, despite what we know are increasing activities in avalanche terrain. This decreasing trend can be largely attributed to better public avalanche safety services for both backcountry recreation and highways, a better understanding of the avalanche phenomenon, better understanding of avalanche risk and cognitive processes and decision making, higher standards for avalanche professionals and industry best practices, and of course the regulatory environment. Pascal and I are excited about the potential for the interdisciplinary collaboration with this project. Many of us in the avalanche industry are always eager to learn new approaches to risk management from experts in other fields. And Pascal and I will aim to highlight all activities at risk from avalanches throughout Canada with a proportionate amount of emphasis for each. There have been several new and recently updated guideline publications for avalanche risk management in Canada, which will fit well into this project. Our biggest challenge really will be keeping it under the 3,000 word limit.
Yes, I'm going to have to cut you off there, Cam. I think we need to move to our next speaker, but the avalanche is definitely exciting and, you know, definitely one of the leaders in the risk world. So I think it's going to be we'll learn a lot from each other. So I'll pass it over back to Sahar, just so we can keep on track.
Thank you so much to all the speakers who are trying to keep it in 3 minutes. It's seriously challenging, and apologies that we need to interrupt every now and then. I'm going to skip the lovely introductions that I had received from our speakers so that we can stay within our time. So just quick introduction. We are going to hear from Fiona Derkle, who is the Protective Services Manager at East Kootenay Regional District. Then we'll hear from Tamsin Mills, Senior Sustainability Specialist at the City of Vancouver. And then Kalpana Solanki, President and CEO at the Environmental Operator Certification Program. And finally, we are going to hear from Johanna Wagstaff, Senior Meteorologist, Seismologist, and Scientist at CBC News Network. Fiona, floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I am the Protective Services Manager at the RDEK here in the East Kootenay, and I'm joining you today from the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa Nation. It's been an interesting experience for me to move from emergency management in a coastal urban municipality to emergency management in an interior rural regional district. I'm going to highlight a couple of the differences and some of the similarities and talk about how understanding the similarities and differences will help us with disaster risk reduction governance across BC. I found that the climate and weather are very different here, yet similarly both have the potential to be extreme and problematic. The governance is different. In regional districts, individual communities must opt into taxation for services. This includes some basics that we would consider in urban areas to be fundamental, like fire protection and flood mitigation. This really limits the regional government's ability to assess risk more globally across the region and to set priorities for risk reduction, making us almost solely reliant on grant funding. Yet similar to urban areas, the problems that we need to solve here are larger than any one community, so the various jurisdictions do find ways to work together and collaborate on regional solutions. Also similarly, the local government frustration with the province is the same. And no offense to you, Catherine, and my much respected provincial government colleagues who I know work very, very hard. And we desperately need the province's leadership, funding, and support. Due to limited staff capacity, local governments in rural areas are reliant on qualified professionals to provide not only technical advice and implementation of projects, but also guidance on risk assessment and prioritization of risk reduction. We're so lucky in BC to have fantastic qualified professionals to work with, and I'm so impressed that they're part of this project. I do miss my amazing colleagues on the North Shore and in the Lower Mainland, many of which are on this call today. Like any new job, I've had to find my people here, the ones who are the champions of their causes, whether it be in climate change adaptation, risk reduction, social vulnerability, or risk communication. And I am finding those people here. The article that I will be co-authoring is about disaster risk reduction governance in BC. And I'm planning to take an appreciative inquiry approach to this very complex subject, to focus on what is currently working well, how that can be amplified, and to explore and refine how the varying levels of government can work more effectively together. I've been involved in the Pathways project for the past 6 or 7 years now, even before Sendai when it was called Hyogo. And I have experienced the reach and scope grow exponentially in such interesting and meaningful directions. This project team is full of people committed to their cause and to the collective cause of resilient communities. I'm grateful to remain a part of this movement and inspiring group of intelligent, committed people where we continue to build a shared vision.
Amazing. Thank you, Fiona, for all that you have always taught us, me, past few years, and looking forward to working with you more.
Oh, it's mutual.
Thank you. So Tamsin Mill is our next speaker.
Thank you, Sahar, and good morning, everyone. I'm joining from the traditional and unceded territories of the Squamish Nation. And I'm joining as a practitioner outside the emergency management field. I work in climate change adaptation and natural hazards in the planning field. Throughout my career, I can think of many times when a resource such as this, it would be valuable, from looking desperately for risk tolerance criteria for debris flow for the Chikai fan and calling Fiona and looking all over the place, to a recent resilience review of regional policy, always looking for the current state of play and best practices, and a resource like this would be really beneficial. So I just want to touch a bit on the value I see in a resource like this, as well as integrating climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction very briefly. Currently, I'm leading the hazard risk vulnerability assessment for the City of Vancouver and applying the UN Disaster Resilience Scorecard for cities to a planning program. And in both cases, a comprehensive set of reference material and recommendations would be very useful. And we are using the NRCan social vulnerability information that Ryan spoke of, and think it's very invaluable, and it'll be a great opportunity to pilot it or apply it. I think in local government, in all levels of government, we're in a process of continuous improvement of understanding the information that we do have on hazards and vulnerabilities and the gaps we have, and hoping to fill those gaps. I think there's also great value in a resource like this in bringing in other professionals to the conversation, such as community and development planners. And I think that's a good segue into integrating climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. We tend to be different professionals in different silos, different parts of the organization. We use different language. We have different temporal focuses, but we're all doing risk management. And I think we can improve the way we present comprehensive risk information to decision makers and the way we finance and manage risk if we bring these fields together. When I think about physical risk, I think about acute and chronic, or shocks and stresses, and then you've got your current risk and your anticipated future risk. And while that might be a future risk, that the time lag in planning for these things and integrating them now in the way we're designing communities and refreshing building codes, et cetera, is really important. So for instance, planning for sea level rise or improving urban heat island mitigation through increasing the urban canopy. We need to start those now. And I think bringing the acute, current, and anticipated together is important. I also don't think that the public differentiates necessarily between climate-related hazards, climate change adaptation, and preparedness for all sorts of disasters. I also think there's a close tie to climate action. Talking about climate change adaptation and preparedness is closely connected. And we don't need to look much further than the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure and the momentum that that is having throughout government. You know, climate change is recognized as a material risk for government. So bringing all these together, I think, is really important moving forward. And I look forward to this process. Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tamsin. Next, we are going to hear from Katna.
Let me see here. Good morning, everyone. Let me see. I cannot see myself here.
We can see you.
There we go. Okay. So good morning, everyone. I'm calling from, I'm phoning in or joining from Burnaby, BC, the unceded lands of the Hunkaminam and Squamish-speaking people. I'm with the Environmental Operator Certification Program. And you might go, environmental operators, who are they? And, you know, we hear so much about washing our hands on a frequent basis. We hear about basically tracking coronavirus in communities, looking at wastewater. Well, who does this work? It's actually, I call them the unsung heroes. They're the people working in the background. They're the members of the Environmental Operator Certification Program. They're environmental operators who basically make life as we know it possible. They run the water treatment facilities, they distribute water to us. There's another group that collects the wastewater, and then through wastewater collection systems, and then it all gets taken to wastewater treatment facility. So all of this work goes on, and it makes life as we know it possible. What's interesting about this group, as the environmental operators know their systems inside out, they know their strengths, they know their weaknesses. They've done a lot of work individually at the various utilities on dealing with risk management related to fire, flood, earthquake, and of course, more recently, because we've had no choice, dealing with, well, what happens if people start getting ill because of the pandemic. So all of the utilities are required by legislation to put in place emergency response plans. But as one speaker had noted, we tend to work in silos. So these groups all have the emergency response plans. And what this Pathways project enables us to do is actually have people collaborating with each other and put together some plans or some mitigative measures in terms of dealing with disaster risk reduction. So I'm very excited about this project, and I'm working primarily with water and wastewater facilities and the utilities kind of related to that, and looking forward to collaborating with everyone. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Katna. And now we are going to hear from Johanna.
Thank you, Sahar. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. It's so exciting to see so many familiar faces and names, and I'm thrilled to be part of what I believe is a really important project, a legacy project that that scientists and policymakers will be building on for years to come. I know we all have different stories and different paths that led us to our current level of passion. I just wanted to share with you a couple of small windows into the newsroom and into the public, and therefore, you know, into policymakers that really, I think, have sort of been turning points in the media industry. And the media is one of many cogs in this machine and in this collaboration. And so I'm really glad that we get to be a part of it. I think for me, though, it started when I first moved to British Columbia back in 2012. About 2 weeks launching a new national show before the 2012 Haida Gwaii earthquake, and having a new news team rush to put together what the public was looking for. And it was fascinating for me to see our strengths as a news team and also the gaps and where the public turned to in wanting that information in that moment of crises. The other turning point was a few summers ago, the back-to-back record wildfire seasons across British Columbia. And for the first time, I've been pushing along with a small group of fellow journalists to have more climate change stories across all platforms, but it was those back-to-back summers that we first had more calls, more emails, more tweets from the public wanting to know how climate change was involved, wanting to know their community's risks and their community's adaptation plans. And again, it was a reminder, I think, to our newsroom leaders that the public does turn to media to be connected with all of you. And finally, I know that, it's always darkest before the dawn, and we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel in the current pandemic. And I know there's been ups and downs, but overall, again, from a media standpoint, and in that two-way conversation we have with our audience and our listeners and our viewers, the scientific literacy of our audience has gone up. And I think the public and the policymakers have seen how important that is over the past year. And I think there's a chance now for us to build on that momentum. I think this is such a great time for us to all be coming together. So when I asked my bosses in the newsroom if I could be part of this project and how excited I was, their response was, yeah, this sounds great, but are you sure you want to do all this work? Can't we just report on this when it's all over? We promise we'll give you all the platforms. This is a big deal. We'll hold everyone accountable. So I'm here to tell you that there will be an outlet for this when it's all done, when it's all together. But I'm also thrilled to be working with so many of you and getting to collaborate and hear your passion. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Johanna, and all the speakers. I have warned you, the audience, that you were up for a great ride listening to all these amazing speakers. So we're a couple of minutes late and a couple of minutes into our 10 a.m. end. So me and Nikki, we are going to be quick, but please remember that we will continue for networking event at 10 after a few minutes of break. So I hope all of you can stay on, but very quickly, some last points on the next steps. Many of you are the authors and are wondering, and you have been asking for more detailed information on what are the detailed next steps. So we are preparing some resources. I'm not going to again go through the details of it. We will make this available. But just to give you an overview, in May, we hope that the co-authors will identify and invite their review panel. Many of you have already done that. Do the preliminary research and get ready for the first consultation session. In June, have that session and develop absolutely rough first draft with a long list of gaps and recommendations. And remember, these are only 6 to 8 pages of articles. In July, we'll have a check-in meeting with the project team, but also I want to emphasize along the way, whenever you need help from connecting to a reviewer or whatever question you have, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Second consultation, focusing on prioritizing the gaps and recommendations. And then in August, developing a draft number 2, get it reviewed by the panel. While it's, again, short pieces, can be printed and be read during your vacation by the lake. Hopefully we are going to have a great summer with all the vaccination that is going on. And then in September, by mid-September, you submit the final draft to the project team to go into the phase of reviewing and harmonizing. Also, once again, I just wanted to say, people that we haven't talked directly, please reach out, look at the list of the table of content and topics, reach out and tell us how and which topic you would like to contribute and how you can contribute. With that, I pass it to Nikki to do some magic to cover the last pieces for ending the session. Nikki, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sahar. Yeah, and wow, what a great team. This is going to be an amazing report. So really excited to see it move forward. So I just want to say, just recap that we're really taking what the advisory committee told us in 2020, December 2020, that we're taking this seriously, what you said, and we're going to be much more ambitious than we had originally thought we would be. So it's a great opportunity to leverage this, what we heard from you and from the advisory committee was we need to include Indigenous voices and we need to bring in traditional knowledge and talk about that when we're thinking about disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation. And that we can't just look at just a specific few number of natural hazards, that we really need to be this be much more comprehensive, which is why we expanded this group into looking at many more of the hazards and risks that really are relevant in the province. And that we need to also think about not just, you know, physical and structural impacts, but behavioral insights and how we could shift some of those perceptions of risk and decision making. So with that shared understanding of the risk environment, broadened that vision, this report, and bringing in this broader group of authors. You know, you told us from the advisory group that this was really important, and this is what we've done, and we've attempted to take this by broadening it and bringing in many people like yourselves to be, you know, a leader in the province and a leader across the country. I really see the other provinces and territories looking and seeing what's happening here in the province to lead the way in terms of alignment with the Sendai principles, in terms of taking disaster risk reduction and resilience seriously, as well as climate impact and adaptation. The communities are really at the heart of this, and they're the ones that are suffering right now. So the more knowledge and understanding we can bring in awareness, the more resilient we can be as a province and as a country. So just before we close, and as Sahar mentioned, you know, I really want to thank the organizing team and thank all of you for being here today, for making this session really exciting, and the kickoff. This is going to be exciting. I know it's work to put it together, but the payoff is really going to be worth it. So as Sahar mentioned, the PowerPoint slides and the recording will all be both available on our website.